Hello and welcome to Writing Academically. This is part of our postgrad capacity building seminars, and this will help you write academically if you are doing a research paper or an assignment or a mini thesis. Okay, I'm just keeping this in screen mode because I have some comments on a slide that I'd like you to see as well. Okay, before we start our writing, we need to think about the structure of our essay or assignment. And I like to generally do this via mind maps. Mind maps allow you to visually scope out what you're going to do in your essay or your thesis or your assignment. And you can use colors and linking arrows, and basically you allow yourself that free reign on a piece of paper that will show you which argument goes where. So it's very important to know where you're going before you start writing. Okay, for the introduction, you would need to be able to engage with your topic on an academic level. And what this means is that hopefully you have done some research around the topic. You have a certain opinion or stance on the topic, and you can engage with the debates around the topic. Okay, so for example, if you have a very broad topic like global culture, okay, that's a very broad topic that you would want to narrow down. And this comes into contextualizing your discussion for the reader. And what this means is that you need to show the reader what viewpoint you're coming from and align them with it. So perhaps you're going to talk about global culture and whether South Africans have adopted it or adopted it to an extent or, shunned it completely. So you would need to tell your reader that you are going to focus on global culture from a South African perspective or a South African youth perspective, and include that South Africa's journey to where we are now has dealt with some racial or class or gendered segregation or battles, okay, not battles, but issues. Okay, so the reader already knows that you're coming from a South African standpoint and taking into consideration South Africa's legacy of segregation. Within your essay, you're going to deal with certain elements, themes, theories, or findings if you are doing an empirical study. And basically, in your mind map, you would see that literature looks at 2 or 3 or even 4 different themes and how you're going to deal with that in 4 different subsections or paragraphs in your essay. So in your introduction, you would say that this essay is going to focus on 2 theories, taking into account 4 different themes, and substantiating this with the empirical results of your study, for example. Okay, a lot of students ask me, how long should my introduction be? And basically what I say is that it must be in proportion. So your introduction length needs to be based on the length of your essay. So that's usually about 5% of your word count. So perhaps if you are going to have a 5,000 word essay, that would be 5% of your word count would go towards your introduction. But if you're doing a large thesis like a PhD or research master's, your introduction would be quite lengthy. There are different types of openings. Some people like to start with quotes or a grand scale of setting the scene for your readers, and that's called a long distance opening. Something like, ever since the dawn of industrialization, you start with a larger scale and then bring it down gradually in your introduction. That would work for longer assignments or mini dissertations or PhDs. Um, but for now, I would like you to do a funnel approach where you narrow it down quite quickly. So you go from something general to something specific. Okay, you can see that in this diagram. So generally, we want to go from general to the specific. Okay, so first you define the general topic, or for example, you want to start off with global culture, so you'll talk about what global culture is, and then narrow the topic down to the essay question or your thesis statement. So you're going to say this paper will focus on the adoption of global culture by South African youths, or the extent to its adoption, then state that this essay is going to look at the extent to which global culture has been adopted, looking at various themes like, I don't know, music or social media and dressing. Okay, so, and then you say, so the essay will argue that within these themes, South African youth have adopted social or global culture, but have not let go of South African culture, which is quite dear to them. You know, something like that. Okay, let's look at a very good introduction. I've added the link at the bottom to where you can find it in case you want to look at this in detail. So the topic is fair trade negative impacts producers and workers in developing countries. To what extent do you agree? Okay, so the first sentence, like we said in the previous slide, you start off with general. So it introduces the issue and the controversy of the argument. International trade has been predominantly controlled by developed countries for centuries, and developing, that should be developing, not developed, countries have struggled to access this market. So you can already see that you're aligning the reader with the fact that trade is not universal. Some developed countries control trade, but this means that accessing trade and the market is difficult for developing countries. Okay, so that's one sentence about generally what the state of international trade is. Then we want to define fair trade. In the green here, we've seen that the author has defined fair trade. Okay, and then the thesis or the assignment here, and this is the person's position, shows that overall fair trade develops increased economic stability, higher salaries compared to conventional producers, and educates community diversification to a large extent. The claim that fair trade negatively impacts producers and workers in developing countries is invalid. So now here that the author feels like fair trade is mostly positive. Okay, the claim that it's pretty negative is invalid. Then let's outline what we're going to say. This essay will focus on the main arguments connected to stability, salaries, and diversification. Okay, so salaries, diversification was mentioned here as well. And it will conclude with suggestions on how fair trade could be improved. So we're taking the reader along this journey with us. Okay, we're not including any other information, we're sticking to the main arguments. I just want to show you this. This is an example of a poor, a good, and an excellent introduction. Okay, the topic is why do we have differing definitions of crime? Okay, excellent introduction would say defining crime is a complex task. Okay, so we've brought in the definition here from the topic. Due to differences of opinion, there's differing here, knowledge and the social environments of individuals and groups. So we're already getting into the argument of what our author is going to say. An individual's definition of crime is shaped by various factors, such as religion, education, past experiences. Okay? And it is also important to investigate the malleability of how an individual defines a criminal act. Okay, related to this, can you see the linking is very good here? Are questions about why crime occurs, the motivation behind crime, and public definitions of crime. Okay, many theories include feminist and Marxist theories, offer ways to understand crime and build on the way society forms definitions of crime. So we could see here that they have brought in scholarly theories. They have read quite a bit, and these are going to be spoken about in the essay. Okay, it shows the depth of research. It also shows that they've thought about this deeply. They're looking at specific issues relating to the overarching question. Okay, so that would get a very high mark for an introduction. An introduction that would get a good or a fair mark would be this one here. This person has started off with crime is like art. It is very difficult to define. Yes, it's difficult to define. Perhaps don't start off your essay with a simile or a metaphor. Okay, it's very abstract and it's more suited to a summing up or a conclusion. Okay, we want to get straight into this with the taking on a scholarly perspective, not an arty one. Okay, here you can see that many individuals hold differing perspectives on a firm definition, and this is due to a number of societal factors. One of these factors is a person's personal definition of crime. You can see here person's personal makes it a bit difficult to read. It shows the person hasn't really got the way of writing down yet. Maybe they haven't read it to themselves. This compared to an individual's definition would be, the individual's definition would be better suited here. This author says a person's definition, once again repeating the word person, also represents a factor that results in many different definitions. Again, we have repeated definitions here. The way the public as a whole perceives crime is also another consideration. Okay, there is a flow here, but this is not specific. This one is specific. This one just speaks about perception and a variety of social factors. Okay, they've also got variety. Okay, but it's a good sentence, it's fair. And then we've got a poor introduction here. The idea surrounding crime and placing its definition, which is spelled wrong, with a set of boundaries, which is spelled wrong, is a complex issue, as quite often specific crime will appear different between individuals. Proof, read this. I know what the person is trying to say, but the sentence is long, it's convoluted. At the end of the sentence, which says with alternative contexts, I don't know what the researcher is trying to say. I don't know what context means. If you find a research is going on for more than 2.5 or 3 sentences, it means that you need to cut it down. Okay, an individual's definition of crime is shaped by the society in which they live, where things such as religion, education, political views, and even experiences, I mean, it's just going on and on with no commas. Experiences of crime and crime in society play an important role in the molding of a personal definition and with themselves. Okay, it's confusing. There's no commas. Usually the rule is one idea per sentence. This is like just the person is not clear in their own thoughts. Okay, it's also important. This it's is wrong. Okay, don't use contractions. It comes across as lazy and informal. Something like very important. Of it. When you say it, you need to be specific. Okay, rather use a pronoun. Why it is so. We're talking about crime here. Okay, so if you compare the poor with the good and the excellent, you can see that the poor is a bit undefined. It's all over the place. This is more like a first draft. All right. In the body of the essay, the body of the essay is basically the main area where you're going to make your argument. It's important to look back at an introduction on the key themes you want to discuss, like economy, salaries, unemployment, if we're looking at the state of South Africa's economy, for example, and working people. Okay, each theme may deserve a subsection or a paragraph. If you're writing a very long text, by all means use subsections. But if you're writing a 2,500 word essay, keep each theme to a paragraph each, depending on the length of the document. Okay, linking is important. And we'll talk about silo-like writing. Each theme, yes, deserves its own subsection or paragraph, but they must speak to each other. They must have linking sentences. Imagine you're taking the reader on a journey with you. You want them to also be able to see the bridges that connect one section to another. So linking is very important. You could say as established in the previous section, or much like an earlier theory discussed, or in a similar vein if you are comparing or linking two aspects, or if you are showing a difference and comparing, you could say contrary to. If you are saying unemployment um, is on the rise in South Africa, you could say compounding this further is the COVID-19 situation, okay? Or considering the factors spoken about in section 1 or 2, okay? You need to flag the reader's attention to your argument and make them come along with you, okay? Avoid digressing or going beyond the scope of your essay. If you're talking about South Africa's economy, okay, don't bring in something that doesn't relate to it, like culture. Okay, of course, culture relates to it, to the economy, but not in the context of this essay. Okay, you don't want your reader like wandering off and down a different path and losing them along the way. This is a good example of a body. Okay, perhaps we're talking about the topic of the use of Facebook in teaching and learning, and you've decided you're going to look at Facebook, the benefits of using Facebook in teaching and learning, and one of them is community building. Okay, another one is being able to access it 24/7. Another one is that it's always going to be there to go back and look at. Okay, so let's say you're going to talk about the first aspect of community building. So you say here one key benefit of using Facebook in teaching and learning is its capacity for online community building. That's your focus. You bring in some research to substantiate that focus and say, as Duffy argues, Facebook can connect students with peers and teachers, involving them in communities, a vital component of student success. For example, now you're bringing in the research, you're bringing in an example of an actual study which was done. You can see you've spoken about Duffy and McCarthy. And in addition, the students appreciated having time to create and reflect on their responses before they posted them. Okay, then in the darker green it says this time to respond may be beneficial for quieter students who sometimes avoid vocalizing their opinions, etc. Okay, so you've explained this and applied it. And then in the last two sentences, you reconnect it and focus it back to your opinion. So research shows that socializing and connecting to others is a crucial component of a satisfying tertiary experience. You've brought in more research there. Thus, Facebook can provide a valuable mode of social interaction for students. Okay, this leaves the reader with no doubt that Facebook is a great tool for teaching and online learning and building a community. Okay, so bring in your idea, substantiate it with research and an example, explain it, apply it to your research, and then finish it off with um, your like concluding sentence about why you believe that it is beneficial. Okay, so avoid silo-like writing. You can imagine silos of grain that stand quite lonely and they don't they are packed like that so that none of the grain escapes. Okay, now don't write like that. Don't write in silos where none of your paragraphs or sentences link to each other. Okay, don't say this author said this and I agree with this. Another author said this. Okay, that that shows your sentences don't blend, link, or relate to each other. Okay, if I read a paragraph, I want to know what your main argument is. I want to have a sense of what you've spoken about already. Also, don't start all sentences in the same way, like research shows or Smith states. Okay, make it interesting for a researcher. Um, you can say, as shown, or much like Smith. Alan also agrees or something like that. Okay. Avoid grammar and punctuation errors. This shows that your work is careless. If you have errors, it shows that you haven't paid much attention. You haven't sent it for proofreading. You haven't looked at it, or you've done it in a rush. Okay, that can cost you marks because a lot of marks, overall marks, look at your academic writing style and cohesion. Then using the wrong sentence is something we pick up a lot when students are writing a proposal because it is something they are going to do based on research that has been done and current states of observation. Okay, so if you're talking about research that has been done, that's in the past tense. If you are proposing how you are going to do the research or your methodology and which theories you are going to use, then that is your future tense. So this research is going to adopt an interpretivist mode of interpretivist approach and will be using non-probability sampling. Okay, it is based on research that has been done by Smith and Allen. Okay, so just make sure that your tense is correct. Then there's the problem of losing your voice or too much of your own voice. Okay, yes, these authors have said this, but what is your opinion? That's what I want to know. Okay, Smith says this, Jones says that. What is your opinion? Okay, at the same time, don't use too much of your own voice. You may be making you may be making statements, but you need to back it up with research. Okay, so don't make generalized statements that can't be substantiated. We'll look at that just now in a example, and then also overemphasizing the significance of your study. In a research assignment, you're not going to change the world. Okay, don't set yourself up for that, saying that this research is going to change policy or mindset. Perhaps it's going to build on research or look at research from a new angle, But unless it's a PhD that is bringing in original theory, and you can substantiate that yes, you are changing policy or mindsets, you need to be very careful about what you claim your research is going to do. This is the slide that I want to show you, which has lots of comments. This is silo-like writing. It's riddled with some errors, so I just want you to see the comments on this side. Here we're looking at the element of crime, and the person starts with crime is bringing our country down. Okay, what does bringing our country down mean? Perhaps you'll have an external examiner that's sitting in another country and doesn't know what this means. Okay, so you'll see here I've written it's a generalization and it's unacademic. When I say unacademic, it means it's colloquial. This is something you would hear somebody saying in a conversation with their friend or their neighbor. It's not something you in a research paper. Perhaps you would say crime is having a negative impact on the South African economy. Okay, it tells me that it's a negative stance, and which country? It's South Africa. Okay, because of the high crime rate, many skilled workers are moving to New Zealand. Never start with because. Always say due to or based on this. Okay, and I just said here, instead of saying moving to, it would be better to say emigrating. Okay, so moving to is right, but emigrating is a better way of saying it. Okay, this causes the brain drain. And here I've said inverted commas need to surround the brain drain because this term has been coined by someone else. Okay, it's a term that means something. So perhaps you would need to unpack this a little bit. What is the brain drain? Okay, research shows, present tense, that over 1,000 skilled South African workers leave the country each year. Okay, Smith showed, now that's past tense, and you can see that I said Smith here. I've ended my sentence with Smith and then I started it as well. Showed that engineers and doctors leave the country for better salaries and safer lives for their families. Now I said link it. If you're talking about 1,000 skilled workers, you need to link it to the next sentence. Instead of saying Smith showed that engineers and doctors, you can say these workers, these 1,000 skilled workers comprise of engineers and doctors who choose to emigrate primarily for better salaries and safer lives for their families. Okay, can you see how we are saying the same thing, but we are linking it and upping our way of saying it with better vocabulary? It's not vocabulary that you have to look up in the dictionary, but it's just a better way of saying it. Then I'm starting again with Smith. Okay, I've got no link between the first paragraph and the second. I've just gone straight ahead into my silo writing and saying Smith states that unemployment is on the rise in South Africa. This is a reason people resort to crime. This is a generalized statement again. Okay, I have made no link so far between unemployment and crime. Okay, and now I've said Smith states, and then I've got stats essay indicates. I've said here, this is a generalization, and I've been starting sentences the same way. Rather say, if you're making a generalized statement, right? This is illustrated by the latest stats from, or presented by Stats Essay, which shows that South Africa has an unemployment rate of 30%. Okay, then I said unemployment, poverty, poor healthcare, and homelessness. Okay, now I brought in some other things that I haven't spoken about in this first paragraph. I've brought in homelessness. Okay, it's completely all over the place. I don't know what the topic is, where the argument is, and I can't tell the writer's position other than the fact that crime is bringing our country down. Okay, so avoid these errors. And then next, let's look at the conclusion. A conclusion is not just a repetition or a summary. I don't want to hear, I did this in this essay and I did also this and that at the end. You need to, it's a paragraph that allows you to reinforce your main arguments. It's like the close statement at a trial. Okay, it's the main arguments. What are the links between the themes? What evidence links to what evidence and what literature? Okay, and what is your main argument? Do not overemphasize the contribution of your work unless it is groundbreaking. Like I said, if you're going to say this study will significantly contribute to policy changes, you need to be able to substantiate that claim and show that you've done this very groundbreaking kind of work. Okay, if not, you rather say the study shows that there is indeed a link between crime and unemployment and builds on existing literature on the subject. Return to the introduction and state your position on the subject. Look at your introduction and ask yourself, have I done what I said I was going to do? Have I answered the topic? Have I shown my position? Okay, and have I done my research? No new information needs to come into the conclusion, but you can propose further studies, like I've done here. This is a poor conclusion that I've written. Okay, I've said in conclusion, I stated that crime is bad. Okay, that is terrible because you're speaking directly. Some authors might be okay with speaking directly, but you'd rather say the paper has shown that crime does impact negatively on the South African economy. Okay. Here I go. First, I showed that unemployed people are driven to steal because they have no money for basic necessities. Secondly, I showed that they cannot afford rental, so they often become homeless. This is convoluted, it's long, it's confusing, there's too many ideas here. And it's just a summary. Finally, I showed that skilled workers emigrate because they feel safe in this country. Here's your evidence. I haven't seen any evidence here. Smith argues that HIV also influences homelessness due to stigmatization. And this is something new. This is new information here, okay? I've never seen this before in your essay. Don't do this. Okay, it might be interesting to you, but leave that for another time. This study aims to significantly change the mindset of people when it comes to unemployment and crime. Whoa, that's a huge claim that you're making about your study. Okay, you are setting yourself up there to change mindsets of people, which is very difficult to do. Now look at this. Okay, this is a better conclusion. Considering arguments in this thesis or essay, it is evident that various factors influence crime, primarily unemployment and homelessness. Okay, so considering these arguments, once again, it's linking it to the rest of your essay, and it's evident, so you've got evidence, and you've got two main themes that you looked at. As substantiated by Smith, Kumile, and Parker, as well as the empirical evidence of the study. So this one is a research paper which included evidence. South Africa has grappled with unemployment for many years. Okay, I've written this because it mirrors that you've looked at research from 2000 to 2020. Okay, and there's a definite correlation between crime rates and unemployment rates. Compounding this, adding to this, the study has argued that homelessness as a consequence of unemployment contributes to break-ins as first posited by Beck. Okay, Beck is a theorist that I just imagined. The study has built on Beck's theory of accumulation. So the study has added to the theory and can be used in studies on factors influencing crime in South Africa. Okay, so that's much more of a realistic claim. And can you see that it's taken into account all your arguments and research, and it hasn't summarized it, but it has reinforced your argument. Okay. So here are some things to remember when you write your essay or assignment. Referencing is important, okay? It's super important because you don't want to be stuck with plagiarism or having inconsistent referencing. Inconsistency means that, yeah, you do reference, but sometimes you're using Harvard, sometimes you're using APA, sometimes you've left out the journal name, or you've left out a date. That's carelessness. Okay, you need to give credit to those who you have used, and you need to show your academic ability in referencing. Okay, you don't want to write a brilliant essay. Well, you think it's brilliant, and then it comes back with like 20% or 25% plagiarism. Okay, so referencing is very important, and and there is negative marking for referencing, so you don't want to lose marks because of referencing. At the same time, don't overuse quotations. Okay, your quotations are chunks that you've taken from someone else's work and used it to bolster your work. Perhaps you can use it here and there, but it's always better to write in your own words and reference an author who you have researched. So perhaps you love the work of Castells, who talks about information economy, network society. You can say Castells posits that we are living in a knowledge economy, and then you talk about it in your own words. Okay, it shows that you have an interest in the subject and you understand it. If you just use quotes from other people, perhaps you don't understand your work. Okay, and then I've written here drafts, and proofreading. Don't be offended personally if your first draft comes back with lots of comments or red marks. Okay, your supervisor is there to constructively give you feedback and improve your writing. Okay, perhaps you want to give your assignment to somebody for proofreading, maybe a colleague or someone older than you, or who's got a degree or a postgraduate degree for proofreading. Sometimes, to be honest with you, you're going through this assignment so many times that your eyes get used to seeing it and you can't pick up on perhaps a repeated word that's missing. Okay, one proofread by somebody else would be able to increase the quality of your work. Okay, also don't use big words that you don't know. Okay, keep it simple, direct, and in line with your argument. You don't need to impress your supervisor and show them that you can regurgitate the dictionary. No, I want to see that you understand what's being said, that you're using academic words, which I don't have to look up, but simple things like changing moving to emigrate, or bad to negative. So don't use big words that you don't know, because that confuses the reader and yourself, and sometimes might mean something completely different. And lastly, stick to the word count. A word count is there to train you to make an argument in that number of words. If you are way below the word count, it means you haven't done enough research. If you are way above the word count, it shows that you cannot streamline your argument, and your supervisor is going to stop marking once he or she reaches that word count. So perhaps your last paragraph, which you've worked really hard on, doesn't get marked. Okay, so word count is there to guide you, and don't look at it as oh, I have to write so much, or how am I going to do this in so few words? Okay, it's just a guide that is helping you shape your argument. Okay, so this has been the seminar on writing academically, and I hope it helps, and I hope it improves the quality of your work. Um, and please go back to those examples and the links that I have on there if you want to go back to those sites and read more about writing academically.